No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us. Hello and welcome to EOS Dublin's podcast, the Ignition podcast with me, Jillian Gotzel. Today I have an absolute legend in the blockchain space. I have Elissa Shevinsky, CEO of Sohotokenlabs and so much else. And we started talking, welcome to the show, sorry Elissa. We started talking and we said, we better stop and start recording because there's so much to cover.
Thank you so much for having me, Jillian. I'm really pleased to be here.
Oh, no, I'm much more pleased. I was going through your background. You have so much. And we're saying how you only look about 20. We're not going to tell the world, but you're a little bit older than that. But you have so much. Your career is massive. So maybe we can just step through some of the stuff that you've done. I mean, you were saying that when you were in college, you helped launch Geek Corps. What was that all about?
Oh, that was so much fun. I was a student and I didn't really have a lot of friends my age in startups, but I had all these older friends, and I got connected to Ethan Zuckerman through them, and he was building one of the very first nonprofits that was going to be agile like a startup, and that was very innovative at the time. It was called Geek Corps, and we were sending tech geeks to Ghana. That was the mission, and there were so many things that were difficult just because it was 1999. I have this very clear memory of Ethan staying in the office very, very late, trying to figure out how to send money to Ghana. Because, you didn't have all of, I'm in blockchain now and we talk about, Bitcoin a lot, and Bitcoin is so exciting because you can send payment transfers anywhere in the world. And we didn't have that kind of technology in 1999. So we were solving a lot of problems that feel like really old school now. I remember packing a suitcase full of O'Reilly books, and we shipped physical books to Africa.
That's mad. Well, I can share that I'm a bit older than you, not looking quite so young. But anyway, and when I was working in Australia, I in PR, in tech, and it was so funny, we would get in these press releases from the US. We would change the name to the local Australian CEO and they were faxed in, by the way, and fax them all out to the media. I mean, fax, that is so, what young person's ever heard of a fax?
I think that restaurants still use faxes now. I'm mentoring some actually young people. You referred to me as a young person. I'm mentoring some college students, and one person came up with the idea of doing a startup relating to restaurants. And I was like, I think they use fax machines. I'd have to check. I'm not sure.
Oh my goodness. That is scary, isn't it? Because I thought I know my father bought a fax machine when I lived out in Australia too as well, for the home, so I could communicate with them instantly. I could write the letter and fax it to him.
I love bleeding edge tech. I mean, that's one reason why I'm in blockchain now. I like the things that are super, super new. And I'm really grateful that the people who I work with are also interested in new technologies. And so I get to avoid that whole world of fax machines.
I think you're probably right there. Now, going on in your CV, there's Everyday Health that IPO'd, and then Brave, which was a $35 million ICO. They must have been amazing experiences for you.
Yeah, I learned so much at Everyday Health. I came on board initially helping them launch their customer service center and running a lot of pieces of that, and also helped launch all of their different products, including what became their flagship, Everyday Health. And we launched something new every 3 months, and it taught me how you make software. That's where I fell in love with making software. That's how I learned how you do it. And I think one of my best lessons was just seeing how much we got wrong as a company, but still did really well. And that's actually a really reassuring lesson because, it feels like you have to get everything right. But actually, there's one thing you really need to get right. You need to be able to sell your product to customers. And if customers are buying your product, it doesn't really matter if there's politics going on with management, or if the employees are just a little disgruntled for one reason or another. You don't want that, obviously. You want to do things in the best possible way, but there was something about really integrating that lesson that if you had a product with traction, everything else kind of falls to the wayside, doesn't matter all that much. And I think there's just something about seeing that in your own experience. So that was very cool. Everyday Health IPO'd. That's a very rare thing. There aren't a lot of companies that did that. And I was there in those early stages, hired by the founders and launching a lot of the different elements. So I think I got really fortunate in some respects. I was choosing to join companies that felt like they had a lot of traction and something really special. But I did get lucky in some respects that all of the early companies that I joined got acquired and really were onto something. So that ended up being a good education for me, you know?
I mean, that's a huge, I mean, I was working with Iona Technologies, an Irish software company that IPO'd back in, I don't know when it was 90s, I don't know, the 90s. It was the first Irish software house to float on NASDAQ, so it was quite famous locally. It's a huge experience, but you have it from both sides. So you've been the IPO route, which is very, regimented and regulated, and you did the ICO then with Brave. What was the difference between the two experiences?
Well, by the time Everyday Health IPO'd, I wasn't there anymore. The IPO happened in 2014, and that was a good more than 10 years after I joined. So I wasn't with Everyday Health through that whole experience. I think I'd love to at some point. I'd love to take a company all the way from the beginning through IPO, but it's more likely to be one at this point where, I'm more of a founder as opposed to a very early employee. And with Brave also, I actually wasn't there for the ICO. I was helping launch the browser. But the difference, I think, with the IPO, you're very, very aware and attentive to regulation because regulation is really set. But when Brave did their ICO, that regulation wasn't clear. And indeed, it's still not really clear enough in the United States. And I think many of us can agree that a bit more clarity on regulation from the United States will help us stay more competitive. I have Anthony Yoon is leading business development efforts for us at Sohotokenlabs, and he's in Asia right now. One reason why he's in Asia is the regulatory environment is just more supportive. There's so much going on with EOS, especially with EOS in Asia. And so we're really looking beyond just the United States. And there are a lot of reasons why EOS is taking off all over the world, but favorable regulatory environments is certainly a piece of it.
Wow. And so maybe I should backtrack a bit. So Brave was your first interaction with blockchain. Am I right there?
Is that true?
Am I telling more lies?
Is it blockchain or crypto? No. Just there's some things I did that I didn't necessarily publish a lot or talk a lot about. When we started Glimpse, we were selling t-shirts for Bitcoin, and we were also selling premium features for Bitcoin. And so I got started really early in. We were using like the Coinbase API and Stripe, like very, very early in. So I was very early in Bitcoin. And then at Brave, that was the first time that I was really looking at how you build things, integrating blockchain. We were looking at how you do payments, which is still a question that comes up at Brave. Brandon is still talking about the choices they made. And I remember Elizabeth from Lightning coming in and pitching us that we should use Lightning. And we were looking at BitGo integration. So Brave was the first place where I was looking at like harder questions and harder problems around, building and working with blockchain. So you are correct. I was just scratching my head and thinking, I did get in the space earlier. It was very cool selling t-shirts for Bitcoin because the Bitcoin money came in so fast.
That's cool. And so, well, actually, go back even further. When you were in college, were you studying anything to do with software, or were you a totally separate graduate?
When I was in college, I wanted to be a journalist.
Okay.
And this is telling my age a little bit because that was like a more proper career back then. This was at a time where people were really reading print publications. And I did an internship at Sesame Street Parents Magazine.
Oh, cool.
And I ran the radio station on campus. And that was really my emphasis. I did take a computer science course and I loved it. And almost all of my friends were comp sci majors. But software was really something that surprised me. I didn't think of myself as a tech person at all in college, despite the fact that I took this comp sci class and I did really well, and I was doing like volunteer work relating to comp sci. I remember installing some hardware at a local school, but I just fell into it. I loved building things and I loved startups. I was always making new clubs and new magazines on campus, and I loved joining Geekcore and getting that launched and up and running. And then I joined Everyday Health, and I didn't really think too much about it. One reason is when I was in college, we had an interim president, and he was like this really stuffy, I'm trying to think how to describe him. He was like a Republican oil tycoon type, not the kind of person who you would think would give you, advice about how to have a wild youth. At least that's how I framed it at the time. And he said, like, for your first few years after college, just go do whatever the F you want. I couldn't believe he dropped the F bomb to us students.
Wow.
He was the college president at the time, interim president. And he said, go do whatever the F you want, because this is your chance to do that. And then later you'll settle into your careers and you won't have those same options. And so when I graduated college, I thought I should just explore things. And I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself. And I didn't say whatever I do now becomes my career for the rest of my life. So I just explored things that were interesting to me. I became a yoga teacher. I became a freelance journalist. I fell into something where I became a manager. I was managing about 30 different people when I was 22. And I discovered that I loved management. And then my friends were at Everyday Health, and I just fell into that. I fell into working at Everyday Health because I was living in a small town and my friends were working there. But then once I was there and I got started, I completely fell in love with it. So I think, life...
I think that was great advice that he gave, wasn't it?
Yeah, and life has been funny for me that way where, and not just for me, so many of the most successful people in their careers have followed the paths of least resistance and chased and followed up on things that they discovered they loved that surprised them. But the world is a little bit different. My first startup was in 1999. And today, I'm mentoring college students today, and they don't feel that same sense of luxury that I felt of having a lot of time. And they're right. It's more competitive now. If you just spend your early 20s kind of wandering around, you're going to discover that you're not competitive for the really interesting jobs.
That sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? So things have changed. So young people now, when they finish college, they feel an urgency to actually get their career started.
And I feel that urgency now too. I also feel that I need to be very focused. And so I look back and I'm delighted that I had this sense of whimsy when I was young, and that I had some kind of ability to find the best people and the best projects to work with, things that really took off. But I look at people today and I look at, the world today, and it feels very hyper competitive. So I'm just grateful that I'm at a place where I already know, what I love to do, and I'm in a position where I can do it. And I think for young people, there's a lot of pressure to be focused.
That's interesting, because I have two young ladies, two children. They're 24 and 22. They wouldn't like to be called children. And it's interesting. They're both in college. But for me, I feel like saying to them when they finish, go and explore the world and just try things. Because I also think that I'm 53 now. I also think that when you're a grown up, Maria, which is the Irish for so as it might be, you spend so much of your time with golden handcuffs, having to earn the bread to feed your family, to feed the kids, to educate the kids, whatever, that I think you should go wild in your youth.
Yeah, I agree, actually, but I have to give that some thought. All I can say is it worked out for me, but the world is a little bit different now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, it's funny. I had lunch with a friend recently, and his 18-year-old son, his eldest child, I think, just finished school, and he's taking some time out, and he's now been a ski instructor in Austria. And the proud dad was showing me all these videos. And I'm going, wow, that's so cool. Because I so believe that people, I think we said earlier too as well, following the path of least resistance. I think when you follow something that you love, things will come easier to you. I definitely believe that. And I suppose that could lead you into a career very quickly, or could lead you into a life of being a dilettante or ski instructor or something. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I was always very nerdy. So following what I love, like, very naturally brought me to startups and very naturally brought me to software. And I'm still following that curiosity today. I became CEO of this company in October. And the very first thing that I did was go to the EOS hackathon in San Francisco. And I wanted to explore whether we could build a security tool for EOS, starting with static analysis. And I mean, not to bring it back to that, but I think the work that I'm doing now in EOS really does reflect that like whimsy and that curiosity. I just decided like, I really want to be part of the EOS community. I really want to provide like security tools for them. And it came from that like curiosity and that whimsy. And there were all these business reasons too. You know, I took a look and I'm like, oh yeah, there's white space in the market. But it also came from this feeling like there's something I want to try and I'm going to do it. And I just got on a plane and I flew to SF and I put together a hackathon team together and we just started trying to figure out how we would build this. And then Ricardo T got in touch with me because he'd heard about our tool at the hackathon. And now he's leading this division of the company. He's our lead EOS security engineer. And so like one thing snowballed and led to another. And it's all been this process of following like our whimsy and our curiosity and our love of the community and all of these things that are the same things that drew me to explorations when I was a kid. It's the same things that led me to become a yoga teacher, to do my first startup. And so there's a lot of things I do that really feel like work and that feel hard. You know, I think that's part of being a grown-up. It's part of being a businesswoman. But the EOS piece has felt very playful for me. We're figuring out now, how do we build one of the first, and maybe it is the first, static analysis tools for EOS. And there's really interesting technical questions. And there's this lightness to it. It's really fun.
That's a word that I've heard a lot recently, curiosity. I'm speaking with lots of people, indeed like yourself, who are very, leading the way in different fields, all sort of in the blockchain area. And curiosity is a word that gets used a lot. And is that interesting? I think there is that because it's such a new industry, it's not just drudge. It is because what can be done. So how did you first stumble over EOS? Where did that come from?
Well, once you're already in the blockchain space, it doesn't take very long. We had a client who wanted our help in EOS, and this was before they'd launched. So that's how I first heard about it. And at some point, I don't know, EOS is doing good marketing, and the different block producers and the different companies are all cheerleading their reasons why. Actually, it was my friend David at Everpedia who really was cheerleading EOS, and I got to talk to Maboud, who I'd known since 2012. Maboud was an early adopter at one of my earliest companies. And so I have, a lot of love for him for that. And he was always very warm with me. And he's now leading community efforts at Everpedia. And he said to me, like, look, we're on EOS now. Like, it's fast and it works. And that was very persuasive and compelling to me because there's a lot about other technologies, notably Ethereum, that I really love and that work really well. But we're still trying to figure out some things out in the Ethereum space. There's still questions that need to be answered for us to do certain things at scale. And it's very cool that, EOS is fast and it works right now. And that was just very persuasive to me. And I also saw, there's a community here that I want to be part of. I like the people in the space. I like what they're doing. And I see how I can contribute. And that ends up being really important too. It's not just, do you like a space? It helps to be able to see yourself in it, to see how you're going to come in and do something valuable.
Well, I think also you touched on the point there, you like the community. There's a very strong, diverse community in EOS actually, and a lot of women in the space too as well, which is nice. And which leads me nicely actually on to the fact that you are the editor of a best-selling book called Lean Out. Do you want to explain to people what is included in that book?
Yes. Back in 2014, I wanted to share stories from women without editing. I wanted to give them an opportunity to just speak their mind without a filter, without a journalist being the one filtering what they had to say. That came out of some of my own frustration where I felt like I had a lot of stories to tell, but I was having trouble getting them told just through quotes in stories. I wanted to be able to share things more directly. And these days we're seeing a lot more of that. But in 2014, this was only starting to emerge. And I solicited stories, and all of the stories ended up having the same theme about how making stuff is easy if you're a creative person, but fitting in is hard. And this is very universal for a lot of women and queer and trans people in technology. But what's surprising is it's not only that demographic. There are a lot of men who experience this too. This feeling that it can be hard culturally to fit into tech is actually surprisingly universal. And Lean Out is a very comforting book for anyone who doesn't, who struggles with that a little bit, who struggles with being at a company and feeling like they're making jokes and I don't like the jokes, or there's the expectation that you'll be a certain way and it's just not you.
I think also what happens with tech companies, and I've worked for a number myself, is that sometimes, the culture, the focus on culture is huge, which is great. It's wonderful to be part of a ethos and a culture if you enjoy it and you're sort of on the same canoe, whatever, you're doing fine. But sometimes if you're, like I remember that same company I mentioned earlier, Iona Technologies, it was a very young company and I was an older woman. I was twice the age of all the employees, and I was pregnant in the middle of my work there. And it was just, I wasn't going to the pub after work because guess what? I had a child at home, so a second child was pregnant. And even that small difference made it, I loved working there and I was very happy there, but I definitely felt different. I didn't feel the same as everybody else.
Yeah, and it's difficult. And the hardest part also has been how people talk about how the tech is hard. But for so many of us, that's not the hard part at all. It's the cultural stuff. And I think things have gotten a lot better. There are a lot of different groups that have emerged. I'm part of Dreamers and Doers, which is a group for women entrepreneurs. I was just accepted to the Wing, which is mostly women co-working space. And so there's a lot more active support. And that ends up being really helpful. And it also shapes the culture in a different way. And so when I think about my culture now, I'm thinking about all these things that didn't exist a few years ago. I can go through my day and who are the people around me. But there's something else to say there, which is entrepreneurship can be the thing that really saves you from being beholden to a culture that doesn't suit you.
Yes.
One of the entrepreneurship is really hard. It's not for everyone, but one of the things that I love so much about Sohotokenlabs is I've chosen everyone who's part of this team, and they're all really wonderful in different ways. And they, for the most part, really like each other. My CTO, Brett Thomas, knows Reuven, who's our lead Solidity engineer, from back when we were all at Glimpse together. And they have so much in common, and there's a lot that holds us together culturally. And then the new people who've been coming in have really been drawn in because of Lean Out, which is so cool because I sometimes have concerns about whether, these things that make me unique, are they going to hold me or the company back in some way? Because as much confidence as I have, I think it's kind of natural to still question and think I don't quite fit in. Will it be okay? And it's been very heartwarming for me that someone like Anthony Yoon, he's been so wonderful at business development and community development, and he's doing all these really cool meetings with EOS block producers and VCs in Asia. He wanted to join the company because of Lean Out. So
that is impressive. As a writer too, as well, I'm going, that's doubly impressive. And I share your vision in terms of, I'm so concerned that women in blockchain, there's not enough of us. And I'm going around the place saying, it's hilarious. For the first time in my career, and I've been in fintech 30 years, and I've worked in JP Morgan in London, and I've been in Sydney and Singapore, and in fintech companies, mostly PR and in journalism. But I keep saying, it's the first time in my career that my gender and my age is a positive. I'm a woman, and I'm 53. It's the first time that I can actually say they're both positive as opposed to neutral or not so good, shall we say. So, I do think there's scope for it. We need more women in here full stop anyway, because it's way too important a movement, a technology to leave to men alone. Way too important. No offense to you gentlemen, but it's way too important. We need to have the women in there too. So let me ask a more facile question. Where did you come up with the name for your company, Sohotokenlabs? What was that about?
Oh, that was just a throwaway name because we needed to you need to make a name in order to get an EIN number in order to send invoices. And so we just needed a company name. And I think everyone at the company now wants to rename it, but we're not sure to what. And my hope is that it won't matter that much because the name is a little confusing for people. We're not based in Soho. I think initially maybe the company was going to be based in Soho, but my CTO, who came on after we were named, is in Redwood City, and the rest of the team is distributed. And I'm not all that tied to being in New York now that Acela Prize, this accelerator that we've been in, will be running up. And so the name was just a throwaway. I think the more interesting names are EOS Secure, which is the name of our static analysis tool that we're building for EOS. And we also have the ETH bug catcher, which is actually complete as of this week. The EOS Secure tool should be ready in Q2 2019. And we're doing code reviews in EOS. We don't have a name for that. Maybe we should name our code review process.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, you're right, because I was kind of thrown by the Sohotokenlabs. I mean, I wonder what that means. I didn't realize it was just a catch-all name at the time, So maybe it does, or maybe not. Sometimes making people go, "Oh, what is that about?" Maybe you get attention. It's like, or call it the SL, S Labs, or I don't know, ST Labs. No,
I want to change the name. I'm just not sure to what.
Yeah. That's so cool. So you got 3 products you're working on: the static analysis, the code reviews, and what was the third one? Or was it 2?
I guess you could break it down and call it 3 things. So we've got this back-end technology that you can plug a static analysis engine into. And so our core technology is, I don't even know what you call it. Like it's language agnostic. And in the Ethereum space, we can just plug in something like Mithril or Slither and it runs. And in the EOS space, we're building our own static analysis engine for that. Yeah. And so it's really like we have this one tool for static analysis and different types of security applications, and then we plug in different things into it. And then we do our consulting services. And really, I think of us as a product company, but we learn a lot doing consulting. Like we learn a lot about how to build the products, and until the products are really, really far along, I think people will need a bit of the white glove service. Sure. And it's helpful because we need to fundraise, but until we close our next round, I'm very grateful for the revenue.
I was going to say, because how are you staying up front? Are you shipping product, or it's the product's not ready yet, so it's the consultancy that's keeping Sohotokenlabs afloat?
Yeah, on the EOS side, we're very focused on consulting. Ricardo is just great. He's really a very talented security engineer on the EOS side, and he's supported by a whole other team of people. And that division is very close to my heart. It was the first thing that I did when I came in and became CEO is to set this up. So I'm really excited about it. And we've gotten just so much love from the EOS community. So it's a big thing. We did raise a bit of money, but we are kicking off fundraising this week. Depending on when you hear the podcast, it's called Investor Day this Wednesday on the 16th through Acela Prize. You normally have like a demo day, but they're changing up how they do things. And so they sent out videos and then it's Investor Day. So hopefully we'll be staying afloat through a mix of software sales and through investment funding. But, we'll have to see how all of that goes. I think, I try to be like really even keeled about it. And I think as a result, I sometimes forget what we have. Like our CTO sold 2 companies. The last company sold was for $110 million. So of course there's going to be interest, but I just try to maintain an even keel because you never know and you need to plan for all the different contingencies. Yes. But I also do have to stop and remember, you have a badass team. People want to be part of this. Like, don't sell this short. It's cool.
And are you hiring now as well or not yet?
we've been on a hiring spree to fill in a lot of really key positions for a while. And I think at this point, we have more or less the team that we need to get everything done now. And fundraising will be for Runway and also to bring them on full time. So some of the people who are on, they're really great, but they're only on part time or as consultants. And I appreciate that people are willing to come on in this flexible way as we get to know each other. But I'm starting to get to know them and saying, actually it would be really great if we had, Elliot or Anthony or Ricardo like 5 days a week, not sharing them with other stuff.
Yeah, you're right. You can see the value of the people you're working with. And you thought, wow, if you had them full time, that'll be amazing. You jumpstart the company hugely.
Yeah. There's so much we can do. There's so much I want to do. That's part of being like a creative person in software. That's part of bringing that artistic spark. Like, I want to build all this stuff.
Mm. And do you, just maybe to round out the conversation then, as you said, you're a creative, which is different to being a straightforward, like a nerdy, you're creative, and a woman. Are those attributes that you have that are they beneficial or are there downsides to it and being a CEO and an entrepreneur? Because they're kind of different things, aren't they?
Yeah, well, the truth is you always just have to work with what you've got. And for any type of personality, there are strengths and weaknesses. That's just the truth of it. For me, I think the qualities that I have are good for what I'm doing. I'm very focused on building things. I'm very focused on the team. I'm very focused on product market fit. And I have a lot of experience and all of that ends up being useful. Beyond that, I suppose I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a man. I don't know if it's, is it some kind of like benefit or handicap? I have no idea. I just know what it's like to be. Yeah. I've definitely seen like really young men just seem to think about sex all the time. That seems like a handicap. I think there's a fetishization of these like young male founders. And I've worked with several at this point and they just think about girls all the time. And that really, so I do think that being more settled in my life where I know who I am, I know what I want.
Yeah.
And when I pursue a project, I'm all in and I take it very seriously. Joking aside, I think it really does help. Like I'm turning 40 soon.
And not looking it at all.
No,
you probably still get carded, do you, in pubs and stuff like that, or in off license?
Oh yeah, I bought beer at a bar at a liquor shop. I get carded all the time. I got carded accompanying my mother to the hospital where you have to be 18 and up. Nothing was wrong. She was just there for a routine visit that happens to be in the hospital. But I got carded to see if I'm over 18. But back to my point, I think this is a very beautiful point. This is an empowering point for women, for people who are older. We know who we are. We know what we want. We have the skill sets to do the things we've set out to do. And that's a superpower.
I agree with you, actually. And and obviously that goes for men too as well, especially the more enlightened ones. But it is true. Age, the gray hair thing, and you haven't got gray hair, but the gray hair thing does make a difference because when you're young and impetuous, it's great. You have all the enthusiasm, you have the drive, and you have creative, lots of things. You just don't know what works and what doesn't work because you haven't been there before. And that's quite nice. Age does bring its benefits. Wow. Actually, this is a very interesting conversation. I'm going to read your book now because I say I'm so sorry that I haven't read it before we spoke, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And I hope we'll have you back on the EOS Dublin podcast again very soon to hear, especially when you go through your funding, what's happening next.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you.
And maybe you should announce your company name change if that's what you do. Or if you don't, it doesn't matter. We don't mind. We'll still have you on.
I appreciate that. But
Brilliant.
This was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elissa. Elissa Shevinsky.
Yes.
Yay! It's a lovely name. Shevinsky. Let's get the handle. It's beautiful. CEO and founder of Sohotokenlabs. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.